Okay, so hopefully you guys remember from last week, we almost got all the way through deploying our Flask app. I forgot to post part two. It's now posted out there for last week. So if you need a reference back, it's available. Down here at the bottom, we are now on week 8. So week 7, if you go back, you'll have Flask 1, Flask 2. This week you will have Flask 3, which will take us through the end of that tutorial. And then on Thursday, we'll start in on our homework or mini project this week. So if we go back to our project, look at our tutorial. You remember that we set up our blueprint and we got everything up and running. We got our index page up and running. Basically, everything was there to the point where we got to the installer part. Okay. So this part is if you plan to distribute this as a wheel, or you want to be able to pip install whatever your project is. You can go through this setup and you can go through that app and do that. That's not very common. I mean, it's something you could obviously do. I won't cover that particularly. What I want you to be able to know is how to deploy out to production. That's more important than distributing your project, right? If you look at the test coverage here, you can write unit tests, and this will let you check your code to make sure it works the way you expected it to. There is a little test client built into Flask. You should try to test your code as much as possible and do those different branches. So if we look at what they're showing you here, you'll end up needing 2 different packages called PyTest and coverage. And then from there, you would set up a test directory and you can install and set this up. There again, I'm not going to cover this specifically for doing tests, but if you are going to write a bunch of big production type stuff, you should write test units to go through that. Anybody have any questions on that? I know I kind of just glanced over that. If you are going into production and you are going to be doing a bunch of this kind of stuff and you're really getting ready to shove your app out, that's when you need to start writing test units for it. Okay. For the purposes of this class, where we're getting you introduced here and we're just trying to get you an app up off the ground and you're trying to learn and understand the concepts of apps, I'm not going to push on it. Yeah. No, it's going to basically create a bunch of data into a database and then test and make sure that things work like you would expect it to. So for example, if you remember, like we did, we created a couple users in the registry or in the registration, and then we clicked to make sure edit worked and close linked and all that kind of stuff worked. That's essentially what you're writing is a test that would do just that. It would go through and try to run the hello page, make sure it can pull from the database, pull it back, open up a client page based on some test data you put in the database. Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, it just doesn't include it. So what it does is it kind of overwrites, if you read through here, it essentially overwrites the default database link when you're running it as a test server. Instead of sending it over to your SQL database that we created, it creates a new SQL database and configures it to point to that. So that at the end, you're not shoving your data or manipulating your data, that kind of stuff. So that's what this is shoving through. It's also going to do tests for your authentication, making sure that you're able to communicate through your auth register and go through and do that kind of stuff. So again, it is important. I just don't want to spend the time on it in here, given that we're trying to get through a couple different packages here and there's other focus to go on, right? Does anybody have any questions on that? So again, what they're doing in Python is they're essentially going through and asserting that you can get to these different pages that you can connect. You're basically writing test apps to test every little piece of your project. So when you actually, excuse me, when you actually configure your configuration and everything up, when you run PyTest, it's doing just that. It's going to test to make sure this Python file is accurate, this one, this one, this one. If everything passes, you'll get an output of that, and you can figure out where everything is. If it's something's broken, it will come back and tell you where it's broken. So it's slick. It's a good way to double check yourself without having to manually check yourself. It will automate the checking process. So if we launch back up our application here, and let's see, I want to get rid of the database stuff. So let's get this closed. Close our services. And if we just go back to the terminal at this point, we still have this website running. We can go ahead and stop that. Go. And remember, right now what we're running is Flask space dash app, right? And then we got Flaskr dash debug dash run or space run. And that launches our application. And this is just our development service so that we can make sure it works. So, nope, you're fine. It's Flask space dash app space Flaskr, because that's the name of our application, space dash debug space run. And that allows us to get this debug up and running where we can debug code, and we get this temporary development server that comes up. And again, when it comes up, we see something like our page here. We remember our login. We can do something like this. I don't remember what I think my password to be here. Something in there. Let's create another register. INF601 password. And then if I log in, INF601 password. Right, and so I can see these other two posts, one by Jail Zeller, one by Lori, and if I create my own, we can go out and we can see we can only have edit access to all this. So all this functionality is still working just like we would expect it to. Refresh the page, we have everything in here. All right. When we want to put this out to production, there's a couple different things we got to take into consideration. We can either build it out as a wheel and we can send it out as a distribution. So if it's a set application, we can actually set it up as a Python package to where you can end up pip installing that particular file. We will need to configure our secret key. So if you go back and remember in our application here, let's go back to, hello. We have auth. Close these down so we can see what we're looking at here. Okay, so we got our blog. And we set up our secret key in here. I don't remember exactly where we put that.
Towards the top, line 11. It's in it pi line 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So secret key we set to tab, right? And that's great for just setting up development stuff, but we need to actually import some secret key. And we can generate that however we want. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the secrets module for Python to create a secret text token, token hex that comes out of here. So if we run this little one-liner in any kind of Python terminal, in this case, we can run it in our own. You will see it basically spits out this long hash. We can take this long hash and use that as our token if we want to. In order to pull that in, what we do is we end up creating a config file. And this is particular in our outer template here. We can use new file, Python file config. And inside here, I hit add. We do not want to add that. Sorry. Let's see. Get. Not want to. Okay, so config we don't want to add, right? This is where we're going to set our secret keys, and we want to make sure that they're not being submitted up to Git. So we take this line here, secret key equals, like this, and then we would actually paste in our secret key that we got here. Notice that we want to set this as a string. So we paste that in here, and we can just save this file as its whole. Now, what we need to do is be able to import this in so that it actually runs inside of it. So when you actually run this, you'll need to set that up and use your config.py section in there. All right. They're using this in the Flask instance and the config section here. So inside of our project, in this init side, we would not set the secret key part right here. In order to do that, when we come up here and we see this test config is equal to none, we would actually want to import that in, and it would bring all of that inside of here. So else app is going to pull this in from our test config and be able to pull this config file in. So let's stop this. Let's rerun it. So now we're running with our current secret key that allows us to use that one in the background. And we'll just double check our functionality, INF601-2, password works, INF601-2, password, and we're able to come in. Now, this session is unavailable because the secret key was set, right? That means that the secret key we just tried to import didn't actually set. I believe because I put it in, I should have pulled from there.
I think it should have gone under the instance folder next to the SQLite database.
Oh, you are correct. There we go. Which the instance folder is not supposed to be uploaded either. They called it dash instance. That's what threw me off there. Okay. Let's go here. See. Try that again. This one and password. And our registration's already at the end. I know they're already here. Login. INF601. There we go. So now that secret token's being pulled in. Now it depends on how we end up deploying that in public. It's going to be looking for this config file inside of the instance folder and being able to try to pull that in. If it doesn't work, which we can see here, app instance, right? Pulling in the path. Then we would set that as a variable in some of our context, and we're going to show that here in a little bit in a different system. So right now, again, we're using Flask run. It's a built-in development server. It's not a good idea to use that for public. It's not intended to be efficient, stable, secure whatsoever. They're going to show you how to use Waitress here on the screen. That one's not as common. Typically, what you're going to see is something like GUnicorn. And so Flask itself is a WSGI application. We are looking to run a WSGI server that's going to run that application, convert the incoming HTTP request to standard WSGI environment, and then converting outgoing WSGI responses to HTTP responses. Essentially be the HTTP server for us, right? There's a ton of different WSGI servers out there and HTTP servers, lots of different configurations. Most in production will use something like GUnicorn. You could also use Waitress, you can use Mod, you can use all sorts of different ones down here. A lot of times in further production, you're going to see something where these WSGI servers have HTTP servers built in, right? but they want to use some kind of dedicated HTTP server that's maybe faster, safer, and way more capable, aka something like Nginx. And so what you'll do is you'll end up setting a reverse proxy up in Nginx to point to your G unicorn that's running under the hood, and then that can pass those requests back and forth. So you are going to basically take requests coming in on 80 for Nginx and redirect that to a port that the WSGI server is running on. So you're going to pass those requests through. It'll also allow you to set up different domains to go to different applications. So say you have multiple G unicorn applications running at once. If they all come in on port 80 or 443, depending on if you have HTTPS set up, if I have it coming in for the jasonzeller.com domain, it gets routed over to this application. If it's going to blog.jasonzeller.com, I can reroute that to another one. And it's acting as the proxy for all those. Nginx is that proxy that sits in front that does all that routing inside of there. Yep. And that's typically how I've deployed stuff like this in public, both for Django as well as Flask, is have Nginx be the front end because it's super powerful and really good at being a reverse proxy. And then you can just turn around and either run G Unicorn under the hood or ASGI or any one of these ones that you see up here above. All right. You can also run these on several different hosting platforms that are out there. So you have Python Anywhere, Google Lab Code. Some of you may know Heroku was one of the popular ones that was out there. The problem with Heroku is they're kind of getting ready to their free tier. But if you remember back in the beginning of this class, you had your GitHub Smart Hub Developer Pack, right? And part of that allows you to have access to the Heroku platform. So you can see that over here. And you essentially get a credit of $13 per month for 12 months. So when you signed up for this package, you should be able to use that. They are working on still coming up with a student developer pack for Heroku. I mean, it's tied in here, but they're supposed to get you some better tiers. There's several other ones that would be useful out of that package that you signed up for. So you have like Amazon Azure, which is going to allow you to have, free access to that with $100 credit on there. You're going to have Google. You're going to have several other ones that are showing up. The one I'm going to show you today, you will have Namecheap if you want to go buy your own domain. So if you want jasonzeller.com, you could do that. In this case, they're going to give you a .me TLD for free, along with an SSL certificate free for you. So for your projects in this class, you don't have to go get the domain from Namecheap or do that. But if you want to have your own name for your project in here, you already have free access based on that student developer pack that you got. It just took 1 year of domain registration. .me isn't that expensive. They're like $8.99 usually, something like that. I can look here real quick, but they're usually not that expensive. I've used Namecheap, I've used GoDaddy, I've used you name it. Right now, most of my stuff is in Namecheap. So say I did something like jasonzeller.me. $4.98. Retail is $18.98 a year. So the first year I get it for $5. After that, it's about $19 a year. So, and the more unique TLDs that you get, the more, or sometimes the less it costs to go over. It just depends on what TLD you decide to go for. Beauty, yes, it's Monster. That way I can put pictures of me drinking Monster all the time, right? Okay. It's possible it would work. There's your project. You can get the jasonzeller.com. DigitalOcean is another good one that's good for just simple cloud hosting. Again, there's several out there, but that's kind of the one I'm going to show you. They'll give you $200 in platform credit, so you could use it as droplets, you could use it as apps, we can use it as whatever. So in this case, this is my hosting setup for my DigitalOcean. They have the ability, instead of setting up a droplet, and a droplet is basically a virtual private server, right? So I can deploy a Linux server, give it so much space, give it so much RAM, CPU, and I pay based on how big that particular droplet is. And it's essentially a virtual machine. However, they have the ability for you to deploy your apps directly. And there's several different one of these that will do that. The benefit of doing it through here is you can create an app and it will tie to your GitHub account. So for example, here, I need to set up access to my GitHub. Come down here to my JL Zeller and sign in there. Who knows which one of these I got set up correctly. Okay, that one. I can tell it which one I want DigitalOcean into. I'm going to do this one for now. And I can tell it which specific repositories I want. So in this case, I want something that is the one that we just uploaded, which I don't believe is tied to the same account. So give me just a second here. This Flask tutorial, pretty sure we're going to commit push, make sure nothing changed here. Push. If I look at my Git, I need to figure out which account is associated here because I'm not on my inner one. So give me just a second here. Let's see here. There we go. Manage remote. This one set up as the prop seller one. So I got to log in as that. Give me a second. I believe that's going to be a different one here. Okay, and you can see this Flask tutorial is one that's sitting outside here. So now I just got to get into that with my DigitalOcean account. So DigitalOcean. Yes, I'm a human. Pick the lions. Well, they're all so cute and fluffy, right? A second here for okay. All right, let's go back to the apps. And again, you can sign up with DigitalOcean. Make sure you guys use the link that came out of your GitHub student pack, because then you'll get the $200 credit that sits up there, or $300 credit. And then for this create app, like we said down here, we can do that from our GitHub. We manage access, which means we have to tie it back to your student account. Let's see, prop seller, there we go, select, and we want specifically this Flask tutorial. All right, This just means we're going to give it authorized access. We're also going to set up a callback inside GitHub. And we'll explain what that callback will allow you to do. So once you have this up, we're going to see that it's here, and we should. There we go. Select our repository of the Flask tutorial. Look at our branches. We could tell it which branch we wanted to do. In this case, we just set up our master, and that's the only thing we set up in order for that to go. And we can set up auto deploy. This is part of that hook that goes into our GitHub. So every time we make a new commit inside of our PyCharm, it's immediately going to redeploy it out on the internet so that we already have that link. So if I hit next, and no detected components. Oh, I know why. So in order to make this work in our project, we have to set up a G unicorn, which is what I was just talking about before, and we have to activate or set that up in our pip environment. So in our case, we have to go back to our project, right? Go to our terminal. Let's stop our project. We need to do a pip install G unicorn. Remember that G unicorn is a Python package that is a HTTP server for the most part, what we're wanting to run inside of that, right? Once we have this in, don't forget that we need to have our requirements set up. And remember, I don't have that set up, hence why it's not able to deploy it, right? So you can do a pip freeze greater than requirements dot text. And we'll see, we'll get our requirements dot text file should pop up over here. You may have to wait a second and it'll pop up. There we go, it's red. And we have this G unicorn not satisfied. We actually have that installed. I don't know why it didn't show up there. Okay. And if we double check our requirements file, we have our G unicorn, we have our Flask, we have everything else that we would expect to be in there, and they're all set up. So we can add this file. Make sure you add it to your Git repository. Add. There we go. It went green. So git commit. See this. Add requirements.text. We can commit and push. And push. Okay, we have our requirements file up. Now, the last thing we need to do is set up a quick config file in order for this to actually run. So they show you how to do this with the Hello World one. We already have a computer or set up. It's not a big deal. All we have to do is create this G unicorn config file. It's very simple. We come back to our main project here, overall, new Python file. And we are doing gunicorn underscore config. We'll add it. And so down here, all we're doing is setting up a bind address. If anybody has worked with these kind of servers, bind means this is the IP address that we're going to associate it with. In this case, because we're running it in an app, we want quad zeros, meaning use whatever the default network is. In this case, all interfaces on that device. So if you have a loopback, it'll become 127.0.0.1. If you have an IP address assigned to your virtual machine, in this case, the virtual instance that's going out in the cloud, we want to run it. It's going to run on port 8080. And then you can see workers 2. What gunicorn allows us to do is run this in threads so that we can get better performance. And we can execute multiple things at once. We're just going to set it up for 2 threads at this point in time because it's a pretty simple application that we created. You would increase this number behind it. If you're running your own server, you may increase that a lot and then set that up with Nginx in order to have multi-threading through that reverse proxy. So once we have this up, now we need to go ahead and commit this stuff. So commit, and we are going to add our gunicorn configuration. Okay, we can commit and push that right away. Push. We're up. And if we come down here, you can see now that we have this all set up, we have our gate in it, or they're going to tell you how to add all this kind of stuff inside of here. We don't have to worry about this because we do that through our application, right? The last thing we need to do in our app platform, so we're going to come back over here. And we hit next. And this time it sees everything that we should expect to have in there, which is our requirements file, as well as GUnicorn running. If we look and we see our C-Line app, and then we have our Flask tutorial. This is what we're after here, right? We hit edit. We kind of look at all the different settings. We have a run command. We need to edit that. And then the run command, what we want to use is this GUnicorn --worker -temp directory /dev/shm. This is going to tell us where to store our certain files. And then we set up our app. So in this case, it's app : and then it says app. We would want to put Flaskart because that's the name of our application that we're running on, right? So we're going to copy this text, go over to our app here. We paste it in, only ours is an app. It's Flask R. Anybody have any questions on that so far? Hit save. We have a simple route set up in here. It already knows where to put it. The two resources we're doing is just a simple web service in Python. So at this point, if everything's set up like we would expect it to, we can do our environment variables. This would allow us to edit an environment variable. This is how we could set up a better key, right? Because we don't have a key inside of there. And so we would have to rewrite our application to pull from an environment variable. So if you guys have never worked with that in Python before, Python environment variables. At the top, we simply import OS, and then we import user equals os.envir, and then whatever we set our environment variable to, right? So if we set our environment variable here as a key to Flaskar _config _, secret key. And then we need to set that value inside of here. In this case, we're actually just going to steal the one that we had in our test configuration file here. So if we go to instance config, we're going to steal this key out, paste it in here. And then we're going to save that. Now we have to have our application actually bring that in. So if we go back to our application and we go to our init file, which was, there we go, right there. Right, and we're checking to see if we have that configuration file and be able to bring in that key. At the very top, we have import OS. We can now set secret key equal to our os.environ, and then we set up our environment variable to be Flaskar _secret _key. And we can say if this key actually exists, then we're going to set that equal to our secret key. All right. That just allows our application that if we're deploying it here locally, should still run just fine. So if we come back up here and we run our application, it says no key error for Flaskar. Did I set that up right? Make sure I typed this correctly. Yes. And so not if, but try. And we could set up an exception if we wanted to. Otherwise, that has it there. 1 second. Oh. Yeah. Except we can just do a pass for this point. And all that's trying to do is see whether or not that key exists. Yeah, I don't want a specific accept. I mean, we could accept on key error, right? So we could say key error, and then we go ahead and pass at that point. All right, so if we run this again, notice how the application works. Right now, what it's going to do is pull from our config file because it's configured to do that. We can see this still works. We log in, INF601-4, password. We know that our secret key is working, otherwise we never get to log in there. So we can log out, come back here, shut down our application, and we can do our git commit. We can say add secret key code for deployment. Commit push. Push. Okay. We go back to our app platform again. All we did was set up this secret key so that we could push this out and that we could pull that in. So does everybody see why we set it up as an environment variable? Right. First time we set it up in a config file that was never getting submitted to Git. That's pretty safe. But when we deploy this out on the internet, we probably want to use some kind of environment variable to pull from on that side. Next, we can see our app info here. We call it CI. We can change that to whatever we want. So we could say INF601 Flask. Go. And notice what's going to end up being our URL here, right? So if we go up here to the top, get a new tab, we're going to have our app dash name to on DigitalOcean.app. And so if we change this, we should get INF601 Flask. Obviously, you guys can't do the same thing, but it should work. You could change which region and all that you wanted to set up to. We'll just hit save. Next. And all of that looks good. Billing side, it's going to try to charge 24 bucks. We should be able to set that to a significantly smaller tier, but it doesn't look like it's going to do it. There we go. Basic. That's what I want. And on our basic, we can set it clear down to this $5 a month for right now. We're only going to get charged as long as this app is running, right? So for the purposes of this class, you guys have like a $300 credit. You could use whatever you wanted there. We're going to turn it clear down to just basic, $5 a month and go. Now, we could build up our own web server through a droplet and have multiple of these apps running through. The beauty of this is that it's already got its hook set up. We just change the code, it's automatically deployed. We can set up our own web servers to do the same thing. It's just a whole lot more configuration. All right, so we've got the app, the basic, that all works. Make sure our billing is now set correct. $5 looks good. Create the resource. We'll watch our build logs up here. So we're going to go to activity. We can even watch it live. Now, the initial setup takes a few minutes because it's essentially, my assumption is that it's probably creating a Docker instance under the hood and then running it in a Docker container there. You can also set up apps to run as Docker, Python, templates, whatever you want it to be. So it's got to install all those packages. We'll wait for it to go. There we go. There we go. So now I'm seeing the build logs. It did exactly what I thought it did. It created a Docker image, pulls a basic Heroku image, and then goes ahead and builds on top of that. This is very similar. Had I built that website, that Halen Farms I was telling you guys about, I basically built that as a Docker container and then pushed that out on that side. that would help build that up there as well. Looks like I have a build error in the app that I set. See if it pulls up an issue here. Because it's setting up Sirocco, it's looking for a proc file. That isn't the way they recommend they should do it anymore for this. So I guess we'll wait and see. As always, this was just validated last year. So their platform obviously might have changed. We'll see what happens here. No build command defined, build complete, 0 non-error code, could not deploy, right? So let's look at our troubleshooting for that. Meantime, what do we have here? No module app found. Bet that's in that uniform config file. Even more, that would be in our run command. I would say their tutorial has changed. So let's go back and look at our app. Settings. So our keys, Flask app key, value, name, GitHub, pulling that down, port 8080. That all looks good. No longer likes you running an address specifying quad zeros explicitly. We're using that. Well, we have to give it a bind address, I'm assuming. Same concept here. Second here, see what's on it. Let's talk about different package, but Good news is you guys will run into the same error and line. So chasing it's not a bad idea. Let's see what we can find in the console. Still nothing there. Executed this earlier, it worked just fine. So gotta be a simple typo. I know how to use using COP and Nginx, and that's how I normally do it. I want to use your nice little application. Listen to the for exception of the process. Okay. Reverse. Now, again, because the simple application that we built is just using SQLite, it's not going to serve hundreds of thousands of users, right? We would want to tie that to a specific SQLite database, which we could deploy inside DigitalOcean here, and then we could tie that out to a actual managed database at that point. For the time being, this should be a very simple application. Let's go back. So complete, and we can see everything's green now, deployed, right? So what I did was just change the run command. I had this flip-flopped, Flask RNF, even though it says in the other way to do it. The other way, turns out it's not. It's the other direction. Okay. So if all goes well, we should be able to hit enter. And no. Super handy, right? Here I say it's all deployed. Says it's all deployed. Console. Runtime logs. Error occurred. Let's try this. Okay. Error occurred. Let's take a look at our logs. Activity, trigger. That all looks good. Runtime logs. Failed to find attribute app in Flask. So one other thing I'll point out while this is rebuilding here, you'll find tutorials on the internet, right? Not always accurate, especially when you're dealing with dev code, especially when you're dealing with stuff like this that changes every month as to the new syntax that's going through. So in this case, I'm guessing here, but the syntax is to just put the name of the app. You don't have to actually specify specifically in the G unicorn string. So if you guys are running into these issues when you do your midterm project, or not midterm project, your content specific project, because that will be one of those is that you do have to deploy it to a live environment, that you may run into some of these issues where you're trying to get that to work. And if that is the case, just schedule a meeting with me and we'll see if we can go in there. Well, let's see, it's not liking G unicorn. Really didn't set up anything complicated here. Sure I'm not missing anything in this. All right, user configuration file, that all seems to be good. Flask being our code, and it should pull that up. All right. We're gonna go back. use waitress instead. So we'll kill our unicorn. It's really wanting the proc file is what it's wanting to run. Requirements. Here a minute. Let's do this real quick here. Roku file. Flask tutorial dude file. It's prop file. Paste this in, and it's not going to be hello. It is log file. Save. Git commit. Push. All right, let's see if that goes. So you can see why in development that things run really, really smooth. And so I actually talked to the web development, concentration of even our stuff. They take you all the way up to this point. They don't take you through the full deployment. And so I wanted to make sure that you guys had the idea of how to go full deployment, because you always run into these hiccups getting it from the real simple development server to actually making something that will be accessible by everybody around you. This is not a web app development course. That's the only caveat to me saying that. It's making sure that we just have this going. All right, so there. Still got an error. Okay, now what's our error? It's interesting because it shows that it's up and working this time. See, app failed to load, failed to find the trivia app in Flask. All right. Back to our profile. Notice that immediately when I push this, that went. Yep, there it goes. It got pushed, and because there's a callback set up on GitHub, it immediately tries to deploy it. So really nice for fast development. All right, what did I mess up here? I'm messing up something. My scores are at. Code still runs with no issues. We have this hello world. I got a feeling it's a problem with our code and we were merging that hello world with all the other stuff that we were doing, which is not set up there correctly. So we just set up this really simple app. Here. Now I'm going to do the unicorn. We really want to get you for that $24 a month plan. All right, see if this one goes. If it does, it tells me that I've got some code messed up in the tutorial stuff that we set up. I'm almost certain I know what that is as I think about it here. I think it's because we created Flask as module. On the outside, I have hello. Just trying to run the wrong app. It's my semi-educated guess at this point, but it's doing the same thing. Wouldn't post that. Okay. Oh, the tutorial for this part? For just doing DigitalOcean? Supposedly this is up and running, and if that went well, there you go. Hello, Sammy. So that tells me it's in my configuration of our Flask tutorial. And if I had to guess, if I go back to that project, it's because this file is called hello and not app. So close this, and I refactor, rename to app. that file, we have that, and because this folder's in here and has it in it, it will immediately pull Flask up. It's the way that's supposed to work. What's that? This one is where I just had the key in there by default. No, this instance folder isn't being uploaded to get it all. Real quick here at the end of class, I want to see if this would work. Push. And then if we go back to my apps. Now we'll obviously want to make sure we go back and kill any of these live ones, right? So if it's up and running and deployed, we want to tear that down. I'm trying to remember. Actions. Destroy that particular app. Okay, let's try to go back and do our tutorial here. Edit the plan, we want the basic, $5. One little thing I gotta change here. Edits. Run. Flask. See if that just takes it. Well, I apologize. One of the other things I was going to hopefully cover today was Bootstrap. So we'll cover a little bit more on Bootstrap on Thursday when we talk about your guys' mini project, because you guys will use Bootstrap in mini projects. Just want to check to see if this does what it's supposed to. So I think I may have flipped that proc file around. We'll see. When I was troubleshooting earlier, I might have that reversed. I hope you guys online weren't saying stuff. Sam, Colton, have you guys been talking? I haven't heard you.
No, I've been muted.
Okay. I was just making sure I didn't have like you guys turned off or something goofy. That would be my luck. Okay, add failed to load, failed to find the tribute, Flask and app. Yep, I'm pretty sure I had these flip flops when I was troubleshooting earlier. Still, file. almost certain it has something to do with this whole Flask gas door. All right, well, that's where I'll cut the video today. If I get it figured out, I will show you guys Thursday morning.